and play on 2nd and 10. That's his youth right there.
Tagovailoa trying to make up for it. Fires to the end zone. Touchdown! Alabama wins!
So today I'll be filming my first round college football playoff predictions, part 2 video. So starting with Miami at Texas A&M. So if I had to choose between Mike Elko and Mario Cristobal to coach my team, I would choose Elko. And Colin Klein, the offensive coordinator for Texas A&M, is staying with them through the playoffs. And Texas A&M does have a better offense than Miami does. But Miami offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson, I also think is one of the best in the country, and no doubt a future head coach. And Miami does have the better overall defense than Texas A&M does. Their defensive coordinator, Corey Heatherman, is no doubt one of the best in the country right now, and no doubt a future head coach. Miami's defense hasn't given up more than 24 points in regulation, and they're only giving up on average 13.3 points per game, which ranks 6th in the country. And Mike Elko calls the plays himself on defense, and he's one of the best in the country at that. And overall, it has worked out pretty well this season, but they have had some struggles at times, like the bad game against Arkansas, and then a terrible first half against South Carolina, and a terrible second half against Texas. But at quarterback, I guess I would give Texas A&M the advantage in this game because these are both very high pressure defenses, and Marcel Reed is much better at running around than Carson Beck is. But Reed has 466 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns on only 89 carries, averaging 5.2 carry. But standing in the pocket, while it is close, I think Carson Beck is better than Marcel Reed. Carson Beck has struggled with interceptions again. He has thrown 10 interceptions, but overall, he's had a great year, throwing for over 3,000 yards. And his accuracy has been better this year at Miami than it was either year at Georgia. He's completing 74.7% of his passes. And Marcel Reed has also thrown 10 interceptions. And Beck and Reed are tied in touchdown passes at 25. And they are also tied in yards per throw, average at 8.7. But I think Carson Beck is going to have a big game in this one. And at wide receiver, Miami doesn't have two wide receivers as good as Texas A&M's Mario Craver and KC Concepcion own, but they do have the best wide receiver of these two teams, Malachi Tony. I remember watching him in his first ever college game against Notre Dame and could already tell that he's likely going to be a first round draft pick.
Dia menjaga CJ Daniels di bagian bawah layar Anda. Di bawah tekanan dari Billy Amuasa dan bola ditangkap. Malaki Tony.
Been the best freshman wide receiver in college football this year for sure. He's caught 84 passes for 970 yards and 7 touchdowns. I think he's going to have a big game in this one. And Miami's wide receiver room is a little deeper than Texas A&M's, because Texas A&M doesn't really have a good wide receiver number 3 to go with Craver and Concepcion. And Miami, CJ Daniels, the transfer that they brought in from LSU, is good, and he's been dealing with an injury that's caused him to miss 4 games, but he's healthy now. And the transfer receiver they brought in from BYU, Khalane Marion, has really come on in the second half of the season after a slow start. But Texas A&M's secondary is a little better than Miami's. They're giving up on average only 182.8 yards passing per game, but Miami's is good too. They're giving up only 190.9 per game on average. And why Miami's defense is so much better than last year is really the improvement in the secondary because their defensive line was actually decent last year, but their secondary was non-existent. And Texas A&M's best defensive back has been cornerback Will Lee. He's one of the best corners in college football and expected to be a second round draft pick. He's got 43 tackles and broken up 7 passes this season. But for Miami, a lot of defensive backs that they brought in through the portal have been big hits for them. The best one being Jacoby Thomas, a safety they brought in from Tennessee. He's got 48 tackles and he's broke up 4 passes and intercepted 4 passes and ran one back for a touchdown. And at the line of scrimmage, the Texas A&M does have the better overall unit on the offensive line, even though Miami does have the best offensive lineman between the two, Francis Mago. And in pass protection, though, Miami has been just as good as Texas A&M, but Texas A&M has been a lot better in run blocking, and Texas A&M does have a better running back room than Miami does, especially if Le'Veon Moss plays, and I saw there's a good chance that he will play in this game. For Miami, Mark Fletcher has been a very solid running back for them this season, but he's about it. Now, Miami does have a better front seven than Texas A&M does. They've been elite at stopping the run, only giving up 86.8 yards rushing per game on average, and that's over 40 yards less than Texas A&M is giving up. No one's been able to run well on Miami this year, and while I do think Texas A&M will be able to run better on them than anyone else has, I do think they will get slowed down some. And Texas A&M's Cassius Howell on the defensive line can be a game changer at getting after the quarterback, but Miami has 2 players like that, Ruben Bain and Akeem Messidor. Those two can take over a game. And at linebacker, Muhammad Tor, the transfer that Miami brought in from Rutgers, has been a big hit for them. He's their best linebacker and top tackler with 54 tackles. And for Texas A&M, Terrain York has been their best linebacker and top tackler with 67 tackles. He's one of the best linebackers in college football. So Texas A&M is a 3-point favorite in this game, and they do have one of the best home field advantages in college football. But this Miami team, even though they did lose a couple of games to teams that are nowhere near as good as Texas A&M is, and I know they still didn't win the ACC championship, but this team does seem to be in much better shape at being able to make a run at a national championship than last year's Miami team would have been because this team beat Notre Dame that last year's team would not have done. And this year's team did win back-to-back road games at the end of the season and in a dominant way. And last year's team lost 2 road games late in the season. Miami is a team that seems to be going in the right direction, winning their last 4 games by an average of 27 and a half points. Well, Texas A&M is a team that seems to be going in the wrong direction because they had to come back from 27 points behind against a horrible South Carolina team and then lost by 10 points to a Texas team that has been pretty disappointing this season. I think this game will go down to the end, but I think Miami finally breaks through and wins the playoff game. I've got Miami getting the win over Texas A&M by a score of 27-24. So now Alabama at Oklahoma. So this game is almost sure to be close, and I think it's probably going to go down to the end. So Oklahoma has been a pretty consistent team this season. That you're going to get good defense from them and bad offense. They've been the opposite under Brent Venables as what they were under Lincoln Riley. But I would rather be winning games 20-17 than 48 to 45. But Brent Venables is going to have to hire a better offensive coordinator because this Ben Arbuckle is not any good. Now, I get why Venables hired him because he was Mateer's offensive coordinator at Washington State, but with as much talent as Oklahoma has on offense, they should be scoring a lot more points than they are. And Mateer's touchdown interception ratio has been terrible at 12 to 10, but he is coming off his best game since his hand injury against LSU. He threw for 318 yards and two touchdowns. And Alabama, you're going to get good defense from them, but their offense has been very inconsistent. They haven't been able to put together a complete game on offense. Most of the season, it's been Ty Simpson carrying them, and Ryan Williams being so inconsistent has no doubt hurt them. But Alabama's offensive line played their best game of the season against Auburn, but then Ty Simpson had a bad game. He threw three touchdown passes in that one, but only completed 54.3% of his passes and averaged a pitiful 3.5 yards per throw. But then a week later, Alabama's offensive line played their worst game of the season against Georgia, and Ty Simpson had another bad game. He threw for 212, but he only completed 48.7% of his passes and averaged a bad 5.4 yards per throw. And if Alabama's offensive line plays like it did in the SEC championship, Oklahoma is for sure going to win. And these last two games are what uh, took Ty Simpson out of being a Heisman possibility. But if Alabama's offensive line can play like it did against Auburn and Ty Simpson can go back to how he's played most of the season, Alabama will for sure win. And Oklahoma is not going to do much offensively in this game. I think John Mateer will be held to under at 200 yards passing, and I don't see Mateer having much success running the football in this one either. I don't think the Oklahoma running backs are going to have much success either. But Isaiah Sigtania is Oklahoma's best offensive player, and he's one of the best wide receivers in college football. He's got 65 catches for 948 and seven touchdowns, averaging 14.6 a catch. And I think he'll pass 1,000 yards in this game. He's a big, deep threat, and I think that Mateer will complete a deep ball to him in this game. He's coming off a huge game against LSU where he caught nine passes for 121 and a touchdown. And some good news for Alabama is Jam Miller, their best running back, is likely to play in this game, and I think him being out hurt them against Georgia. And more good news for them is Josh Cuevas, their tight end, is also likely to play. He hasn't played since the first meeting with Oklahoma, and he's one of the best tight ends in college football. And Oklahoma actually did struggle to stop him. He had 6 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown in that game. But
30.4%, eighth best nationally. Cuevas is wide open, and he walks in for a touchdown.
some bad news for Alabama is defensive lineman LT Overton is not likely to play. But Oklahoma, good news for them is R. Mason Thomas, who missed the first game with Alabama, is likely to play. But bad news for them is their best cornerback, Gentry Williams, is out for the rest of the season. But I think Alabama will be held to under 100 yards rushing in this one. And I think Oklahoma will get at least 3 sacks in this game. And I know it probably makes more sense to pick Oklahoma because they won the first meeting in Tuscaloosa and now it's in Norman. But I have a feeling that Alabama, having lost 2 in a row now to Oklahoma, and coming off such a bad game against Georgia, is going to be very motivated. And I have a feeling that Ty Simpson is going to have a good game and Alabama gets the win. I've got Alabama 20, Oklahoma 17. So that'll be it with this video. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.